It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I'm excited to bring you somebody and have a conversation that, when I met Sarah Caminiti, was a game-changing conversation for me. We started talking and then went to the next conversation and the next conversation, and we've just built this friendship and relationship and business association that has been amazing. And I was like, okay, we got to have you on Her Success Story. You listeners are going to be transformed. So let me tell you about Sarah, and then we're going to jump in. She's a strategic consultant, speaker, podcast host herself. So hey, fingers crossed, you might be hearing me on her show soon, called Epical Growth, specializing in retention strategies and leadership alignment. One of the things Sarah is really passionate about is working with organizations about customer loyalty and how that plays into sustainable growth. So very often we're talking about growth and we talk about strategy, and I talk about that stuff a lot. But what Sarah brings to the table is how she looks at the customer relationship. So, Sarah, thanks for joining me here today on Her Success Story.
Oh my gosh, I have been counting down the days for this to happen, and thank you for such a wonderful introduction. It is mutual 1000%, and I can't wait to have you on the podcast. But I'm so happy to be here.
And you know what is funny and interesting is Sarah and I hopped on this Zoom, and we just started talking. I was like, damn, we have to record a podcast. Hold on a second, we got to focus. Let's start with the backstory a little bit. Let's start. How did you get started? How did you get into this?
Yes. So my career trajectory is a little all over the place.
Welcome to the world.
Exactly. I think
In
that
this
some of
day and
the
age.
coolest ones come with a little sprinkle of crazy in it. But I started working with customers when I was 15, like a lot of us, in my first job. And I was always
Over here.
Yes, exactly. Like, you have to connect with the people.
Yep.
And I loved helping them be successful in whatever way that I could. And I didn't think that I could have a career in customer experience or customer support because, frankly, at the time, that wasn't even really a thing. This is a newer, like, career where you're seeing these roles being built and molded and shaped in these tech companies most specifically. But I was just seeing retail opportunities. I was seeing restaurant opportunities for your chance to connect with customers. So I kept leaving, and I kept going to all these places that I thought would be great, but they weren't. And every time that I was there, I would find my customer. And whether it was when I was working in employee benefits and I was supporting the account managers and doing all of the presentations for the companies that we were presenting the different plans to, they were my customer. Or when I was an executive assistant and the CEO was my customer. It was this invisible string that I started to recognize that I thrive when I have an opportunity to problem solve and think about ways to optimize someone's day. And that is where
I just got to jump in. I thrive when I get to figure out how to optimize a customer's day.
Yeah.
There is not that many people who I've ever heard say it. I have heard it once or twice, and it was many, many years ago around the customer experience at Zappos back in the day when they were very new.
Yep.
And what they put into their customer experience. So when you see what is working and what is not working, tech companies, everybody's leading into technology. Technology is a fast, I'll say, it is the light year evolution, like the industrial age, right? Like, the choo-choo train. We went from horse and carriage to motors and choo-choos. It is that rapid pace evolution that we're seeing going on in our business world from the technology world.
Yep.
What do you see as the customer piece here? Because nobody thinks about customers with technology. We think about technology and, oh, are you in AI? Are you doing this, that, and the other thing? But we don't think about the customers.
I think the most important thing to remember when you're thinking about technology is right now we are in this boom and there are so many companies doing incredible things, but a lot of the time they're the same thing. They're just maybe packaged a little bit differently. Your opportunity is to be the differentiator in how you treat your customer. And if you start thinking about retention before you even necessarily have your first customer, like how are we going to make these people be obsessed with our company? How are we going to make them feel like they are part of this journey with us? Then you start to notice, okay, well, the data that we collect from customers from the beginning, that we need to feed right into product. That needs to be fed right into marketing. All of these webs start to appear where the customer experience team is right at the center. And something that I realized recently that kind of was like, what the heck is going on here is I started thinking about how common it is for founders to take on the role of customer support or customer experience until that absolute last moment where they no longer have the capacity or things are starting to like drop because they can't handle it. And I
Not their
started
job, and it's not necessarily their sweet spot.
exactly. That's the thing. It's like,
Especially technology founders are not always naturally the person with the people skills in the team. You know,
yes,
they don't lean into or have not yet, and I'll say yet with capital YET, right, developed the emotional intelligence and worked on that for a customer base. It's a different set of skills than
100%.
very often technology founders. We need our technology founders in their sweet spot.
Right. Right. 1000%. You wouldn't, if you were not a developer and you were a founder and you, let's say you just had an idea, you wouldn't put yourself as the developer to try to figure it out. You would hire a developer to come in and make your vision come to life. So, why is that not the same when it comes to the people that are actually paying for your service? It kind of devalues the customer experience from day one when the founder says, anybody can do this. I can do this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this at the exact same time, instead of saying, I need an expert to come in and build a foundation so that
Right.
our customers are taken care of and they want to tell their friends about it so we can have this growth trajectory that nobody saw coming.
And it's interesting because when I speak to founders, I know their desire to touch the customer is the desire to develop more tech.
Yes,
What they right, they want to be that hands-on. They want to be hearing, which I love.
that's
But in
so
order to
great.
scale, which is what you're talking about, that growth potential, then it's one of the key things that has to be released.
100%. And it needs to be something where we don't want to take the founders away from the customer, but there's so much data and there's so many tools that have been developed recently with AI that are allowing us to analyze data from a non-biased perspective and allow us to do those QAs on all of these conversations in ways that I was doing manually for years and it would take so much time, but it's so valuable. So trust that the CX teams, these experts, know how to utilize these tools to get you the information you need so you're still connected with the customer. You can hop on those calls with the customer, but those are founder calls. Those are not customer support calls. And those are two totally different things.
Different things. So let's just define for the listeners who might not know, CX stands for
Customer experience.
experience. So it's customer experience, ladies and gentlemen, when we refer to CX and we're talking about the customer experience. And so think about that for a second. And I'm going here for a reason. The founders are thinking about the tech piece. Your customer experience experts are thinking about what's the experience for the customer. What
Yes.
happens when we go and we click these buttons, when we want to know more information, when we need more help, when we're leaning in, we're asking for customer support, etc.
Yes. Yep. And there's also user experience teams and those that are more technology based, those are design based, those are flow based. And sometimes there's a little murkiness of, well, we have a UX team. So why do we need to have this focus with customer experience? And again, just like those founder calls and those support calls are two different things, the design piece and the actual customer information and understanding what that root cause is for them those are two totally different things.
What do you see when you come in and help customer experience teams? What are some of the key things you see that are the hotspots?
There's a lot of silos still. There's too many silos. It is so many little teams are doing their best and they're working their butts off to do what they need to do, but they're not talking. And a lot of the times they're not talking to the customer experience folks. They're not talking to the customer support folks. And they're making these assumptions about all of these things that need to happen, or they want those shiny innovative things to come out super fast, but in doing so, they're creating something called tech debt. And that is when you move fast and you know that something's going to break eventually, but you can get it out for now and it'll work and you'll deal with it later. And that tech debt just starts to pile up, and then it becomes the excuse for why you can't solve bugs or why you can't enhance things because you're too in the weeds. And one of the first things that I do when I go into companies is I ask them to actually sit down and assess what they deem to be tech debt and give me an understanding of how long it would take if we didn't innovate for a month, 2 months, and it was all hands on deck. Let's clean this up so we can just be thoughtful with all of our decisions moving forward. And we don't have that stress of
Right.
we can't do these things because of all of this. Let's start thinking about this all the way instead of just getting something out and communicating that with investors,
Yeah.
because investors want to see things happen fast, but also investors don't want churn. And if this tech debt is preventing customers from being successful, if it's creating frustrations with customers, I mean, I just read a statistic that 94% of customers will leave with one bad experience. And if you are setting that as an opportunity, then you are setting yourself up for failure for absolutely no reason.
It's interesting because when you refer to one bad experience, okay, there is so much out there. And so when we're making decisions, and I'll actually give you a specific example because this was asked of me the other day. Somebody asked me about a CRM system. Now, I will never, ever, ever proclaim myself to be the technology recommendation person. Okay. Not my sweet spot, not what I know well. Don't
Nothing
know.
wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Okay. And no, it's not like know what you know and know what you resource.
Yep.
Okay. Strong believer in that. Okay. So this is not my area. And I was just like, well, what are your goals? Because now I want to connect them to the right person. So I'd start asking them, what are their goals in the CRM? How are they looking to use it? How are they looking to accomplish it? I said, I know you a long time. You want something simple and easy, something that's like a 1-2 click thing. You're not looking for a big something cumbersome. Your company is built in this way. Your back end systems cover that. So this doesn't need to touch that necessarily. You're really looking for something for specifically this. And I spoke to somebody else and they told me about a CRM. I was like, oh, that's what I use. This is what you're going to love. She goes, did you ever reach out to them and ask a question? I'm like, oh my God, I've been using it probably 15 years. Maybe at the beginning, but I just use it.
Right.
And she goes, there's so much, and they are this greatest team to reach out to. Ivy, just reach out to them. And Sarah, this comes back. I share it because this comes back to exactly what you're saying. It's a simple, basic system that works for myself and this company, right? But they're people, and I didn't know it. And now I'm like, I have it on my list. I was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to them in doing some things differently in 2025, right? But the customer experience team, I'm hearing about from other people of
Right.
how. So what do we need to know about this? What is it that you're seeing and doing when you come in and work with customer experience teams that separates them? And I wouldn't be surprised if you've worked with this company.
Well, I think one of the first things you have to do if you are building or kind of just assessing a customer
Right.
experience department is understand how they are feeling. If they're feeling rushed, if they don't feel like they have the resources that they need, if they're afraid to ask questions, then that is the number one thing you have to address, because the customer feels that. And in those interactions, like the one you were just describing, if you are nervous as a customer experience representative or a customer support person, that you're going to get in trouble all the time or you're going to get fired all the time. You are quick. You are making assumptions. You are not looking into things. You are just trying to move those transactions instead of pausing
Right.
and looking at the actual person on the other end and seeing, oh, hey, I noticed that you're using this, or wow, you've been with us a really long time. Is there any feedback that you have for us? And then you start a dialogue with them. But if you don't have the ability to pause, then you do not have the capacity to offer anything other than a transactional bit with the customer that they'll forget in 2 seconds. So that's number 1. And then assessing the tools. I think that looking at tools right now is really important with this, all of this AI that's happening, and
100%.
understanding the preparation that needs to be in place before you start implementing AI, because people want things fast. CEOs want things fast, investors want things fast. And you have to build and prepare and create, again, another foundation so that when you integrate these tools into your everyday, you are not then creating 10,000 times more work for your teams without the resources to make it so that they can help the customers and pause.
What is your vision for your future at this point? Because
What a
you are
question.
in a incredible, your background is technology. You've worked in technology a very, very long time. You have this really great sweet spot in customer experience. So what do we see for your vision?
I have been thinking about this a lot, Ivy, and usually it comes right after we get off a phone call. But I have been thinking a lot about the opportunities to be a foundational, I'll say, architect, for lack of a better term, with startups and working with VCs to build those webs for companies before they get too far into the journey, when it becomes overwhelming to fix some of these things, so that the customer experience, the customer voice is heard everywhere from day one. And retention is a strategy instead of an afterthought, and kind of like a panic mode that you go into when you start to notice churn. So having the opportunity to talk to customers, and my customers, which would be founders or people that are leaders in the CX space, and figure out ways that we can get rid of those silos, make people want to see the value that lives within all of these customer interactions, because you are having customers come to you every single day and ask you questions and tell you things about your product. And that is so much more valuable than any survey that somebody who had a bad cup of coffee and is just angry at the world is going to tell you. And just make sure that that is your focus.
What has surprised you in your journey so far?
How much valuable data exists within these customer interactions. That was a big game changer in terms of my confidence in presenting information, because being a leader in this space, it is hard to get the other teams to really value and listen to what you have to say, because it hasn't been something that's been shared until recently. This is new, thinking about data from these customer interactions. And so figuring out the best way to share my information with the other teams and get the resources I need and advocate for my teams, and by doing so advocating for the customers, has been something that has taken time, and it has required a lot of punches to the gut because it didn't go the way that I
Yeah.
wanted, but not taking that too personally and using it as an opportunity to assess, and then hopefully, through the many different connections that I've made over the years, help others that are in positions like I have been in know how to navigate that, own their worth, and articulate their value, so that they can be empowered leaders that teach other people how to be empowered leaders too. So
Leaders. right? The ripple effect.
It's a cool thing.
It really is. And there's that, there is the ripple effect that goes once we learn and grow what we can naturally give to the next and give to the next. And that ripple effect of how it happens. I will always say being in sales for a very long time and started in my early 20s. Okay. We are not in business without customers.
Yep.
We are not in business without customers. And if companies, and they look at sales, they look at customer acquisition, but they don't look at the lifetime value of that customer
Exactly.
often enough.
Yep.
And if companies can focus as much of their energy on not just the acquisition, but the lifetime value and the customer service piece, the power that business has.
Yes, yes. It is 5 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to keep one. And I think I also read that if you increase your retention by 2%, you could see a 95% increase in revenue because you are
Wow.
not
I didn't know
losing.
those numbers.
Yes, I went on a deep dive of data and it blew my
Your
mind.
thing.
Yes, how the heck are we not talking about this? Because this is bonkers sort of information. But yeah, it is profitable. It is a growth center if you actually utilize it. And I'm excited to see what happens.
Sarah, how can our listeners learn more about you? And let's give a little plug for the podcast.
Yes, thank you. So please find me on LinkedIn. I am Sarah Caminiti on LinkedIn. You can find my podcast, Epical Growth. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful. I am thinking of renaming it because Siri keeps sending me to a baseball podcast whenever I try and pull it up. So
So
season
there,
two.
there could be an adjustment next year.
Yes, so follow it on wherever you listen to your podcast so that if a new name comes around, you don't have to search for it. And then also you can find my website, Epical Operations, also could have a rebrand because it's a hard one, or sarahcaminiti.com to learn about the services that I offer, the coaching and the consulting, and any other little nuggets, or even just to say hi. But I
I
love
love
talking
it.
to people.
And Sarah is the best at just picking up the phone and just having a conversation and moving a needle and gaining some insight. So, listeners, she really actually does mean it.
Yeah, I really do mean it. And I mean, Ivy, same exact thing for you. You just hopped on the phone when you were going on a little bit of a road trip, and I love you for it. So having those people in your life means a lot. And, but please don't be a stranger to all of you listeners. I would love to meet you.
And, listeners, I think that's a tip from Sarah and I of build yourself a world that you have people that you could pick up the phone and call
Yep.
and gain some insight. And when you hop in a car and going on a road trip, and I was in the rain, that you have somebody to keep you a little company with some really good conversation that matters
Yep.
for you, your growth, your business, your future. This is what happens at the end of her success story for those new listeners who maybe from Sarah's community joined us. You take a breath. Think about the one thing from this conversation that was your biggest takeaway. What was that one thing for you, that aha moment? Write it down somewhere. Make a note of it. I don't care if it's in your phone, if it's on a piece of paper, it's irrelevant, but make a note of it somewhere. And then the key is to make the decision of what are you going to do with that takeaway or aha that's going to impact your future, your business, and your career. That's what great leadership is. Thank you for joining me here today on her success story. And hopefully you will be seeing me soon on Epical Growth. And in the interim, decide what you're doing with your 2025 and know we're here to support you to make that happen. See you next time.